So that was lesson 121 from Course in Miracles, which is today's lesson. So today, what the sign outside says, on one side it says full, and on the other side it says purpose. So we read it purposeful or full purpose. And I was thinking about this as the idea that purposeful, like implies that we are like our purpose is immersed in us. So in other words, we are filled with purpose. And then full purpose, that's like saying there's a whole thing. There's this purpose is whole and integrated and is internally consistent. And I was thinking about this. This is a topic that comes up. I mean, it comes up in the midst of just about everything we talk about, because we find that the fulfilled life grows out of purpose. And the meditation this morning about forgiveness being the key to happiness, this is what the Course identifies as our function, that our function is forgiveness. And the forgiveness, what forgiveness is seeing the error, bringing it to the light of love, and then seeing it differently, watching it transform, whatever we thought that error may be. So this the function, the purpose, the full purpose that the Course describes is us changing the way that we see really everything. But that leads right into, as soon as we do that, that is what the Course says, that is being helpful. That when we're doing that is being truly helpful. To forgive then is to be truly helpful. We just follow that thinking right down the line to, so being helpful, then that's service. So, and this is why above the door it says service, proper service. And that proper service would be doing the right thing for the right reason, hopefully at the right time. And so being helpful, so I'm of service, which means I'm helpful, which means being truly helpful. What the Course says is, I forgive all the baloney. I forgive all of the stuff that has me worked up. I forgive suffering. I see it differently. And there's this, there's a path. This is the path that we're on. And I just was noticing how similar, even though the language is different, how similar the path that the Course lays out is to the path that the Buddhists have laid out, that Shakyamuni laid out in the very beginning. He said this. He said suffering is in the world. And the cause of suffering, and this has been misinterpreted many, many times, is desire. And when he was talking about the cause of suffering being desire, he wasn't really talking about desire like the desire of the heart. He wasn't talking about the desire, the aspiration of the heart to grow and to give and he wasn't talking about anything that really has to do with love when he was talking about desire. He was talking about grasping, clinging, trying to get as desire. And then he was also talking about the wanting to avoid suffering. So this desire that he is talking about is this kind of is the going out into the world to get stuff, thinking it's going to make us feel good, and then doing everything that we can to avoid pain. So this is the kind of desire that, and this is, and the reason that we do it is because we feel as if we are apart from the larger organism. We feel that we are separate from the greater consciousness, which is the exact same thing that the Course is telling us. that the cause of all of our problems is our separateness, which makes us act, do, think, say all the things that we do, which increase suffering. So, what the Buddha said about this was that he called it dukkha. Dukkha exists, and dukkha is unsatisfactoriness. It's suffering, discontent, stress, and of course, it's all caused from this conflict of grasping and avoiding. Grasping and avoiding. And then, of course, delusion is the third part of it, which is how we fool ourselves in regards to all of it. One of them talks about delusion just being as confusion, but it's more than that. It's actually justification, rationalization, so these things cause this suffering, and that dukkha exists in the world. Suffering exists in the world that we have made. And this path that we're on, which is our purpose, is to alleviate that suffering. So the cause, then, he tells us, of dukkha is craving or clinging. Craving sensory stimulation, craving existence, craving non-existence gives rise to this continuity of being, tendency to confuse reality with our perception of reality. So what we confuse what's real with what we think. We think we see what's real, but we don't, because it's all colored by all these other things. So then when we are able to release this craving, and craving, that's a very good word for it, because it's like yearning could even be a positive thing. Like we could yearn for harmony. We could yearn for return to oneness. That could be a yearning in our heart to be part of the community. That would be a yearning that's returning us to our original state. But craving is like when you can't stop eating the ice cream. You're just on it, right? Where you can't, whatever kind of addictive pattern we're caught up in, can't stop, even with all of the reasons why we should. And so to release that craving is the way to not just escape suffering, but to be a conduit and to be able to have the purpose of helping other people to escape suffering. So if we can stop this endless wanting, we won't suffer anymore. And there's a lot to be said about that, and we'll take some time with that on another day. But the idea is to just examine what is it that I want, and why is it? I heard Jack Kornfield said, he said, my teacher used to tell me the problem with you is that you don't want enough. That what you should want is the whole thing, the whole world, the whole of creation. You should want everything. And so, what his teacher's trying to point out is what you should want is wholeness, being one with all of this, rather than these little separate distractions that you're looking for. And then he said to him, he said this really funny thing. He said, you know why you suffer so much is because you want what you don't have, and you don't want what you have. Silly. Why don't you just want what you have and not want what you don't have? Simple. So how would we go about doing something like that? Is we would be grateful for what is, right? We'd just be grateful for what we have. Be grateful and happy with what we have, and knowing that from that state of mind, the other small things come, but most importantly, we feel more integrated. We feel more in harmony. So, and then this path that leads out from this wanting, they call this path the Noble Eightfold Path. This is what the Buddhists call it, the Noble Eightfold Path. And this is the end to craving. And how we do it is we live by these ideals of this path. The path of course, is grounded in mindfulness. This is where it has to start. It has to start with mindfulness, and you were saying earlier about doing these meditations. Well, this is where it has to start. We have to, in order to, we don't have to, we can stay in suffering as long as we want. But if we want to do something about this, we have to begin with a practice of mindfulness. And we can start with 5 minutes and extend it from there. But I mean, what I'm talking about is a formal path, a formal practice sometime during the day where we sit and don't do anything, just observe our mind. The more we observe our mind, the more we're going to know ourselves. The more we're going to realize when we're getting caught in craving. The more we are going to realize when we're getting caught in aversion, trying to avoid pain or trying to gather pleasure. And therefore, then we can just notice it and examine what's going on, see what's really happening, and then make probably a better decision than we would have made if we weren't being mindful. The more mindful we are, the deeper this experience becomes. So it starts with this, with mindfulness, and then it is a path of self-discipline regarding right conduct. Let's say it's a path of discipline where not because somebody else tells us to do a certain thing, but because in the midst of our mindfulness, we see that going down this way is going to cause harm to us or to others, so we choose the other path. It's not anything about somebody enforcing it. Now, of course, the other piece is that karma is cause and effect, is when we make those less than the best choices, consequences occur. And sometimes we can't even know. We don't know what's going to happen, but the more we choose the less than ideal path, the more less than ideal results we get. And this law of karma is like, it's going to come back sooner or later. So but also what's really nice about the law of karma is as soon as we start making more choices the other way, we actually can erase bad consequences. So this path is a thinking path. It's about observing thought, considering it, and changing the ones that aren't helpful. And then with this experience comes some wisdom. And so here's the thing. What we tend to do is we pursue either everything that we want, or we say, I'm going to give up everything. So we're going to, like, the diets are like a very good example of this. I'm just going to eat everything that comes in front of me, or I'm going to restrict myself to this total, something that's going to be a drastic, and I've done this many times. This is drastic dieting, but actually, neither one of these is correct. What's correct is the middle way. What's correct is moderation in all things. And once we have a habit of moderation, and we aren't binging on this side and then totally denying ourselves on this side, the body itself just starts doing what it's supposed to do. And this is the way it is with just about every activity in life, is that if we can keep ourselves and that's of course what the Buddha found, was the middle path is the way to happiness. So this the eightfold path. It starts. The first one has to do with understanding, right understanding, or right view is the first part of this path. So right view it has something to do with knowledge. It has something to do with knowledge. We can gather some knowledge and get so we've got like some background information. But more than that, this idea of right view, right understanding would always have to start with the understanding that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And from here, if we can establish this in mind, is this right understanding, this right view, to see ourselves where we really are, part of something greater than ourselves, it sets the stage for all of the other things to come, because the problem is we have the wrong view. We have the view that we're alone. and that many times we're under threat and we're worried about what's going to happen next. And from this mindset, we end up pursuing pleasure and trying to avoid pain. We can't find the middle way. So then the next part of the path, and I'm just going to go over this very simply this morning. We'll take some more time later to really explore these things further. But the right intention. So I want to establish this. The power of intention is like, you can watch this work in so many ways. You can decide that you're going to have a goal is an intention. Okay, I've got a goal, and I am going to take a trip. I want to take a trip to Paris. But I don't have the money to take a trip to Paris. But it's my intention. I intend to go to Paris. Now I can wish and pray and hope and all this kind of stuff, and maybe perhaps, some fortune falls in my lap, or if I'm a gambling person, I play the lottery and I win, and then I could go to Paris. But that's not how intention works. What intention says is, I am focused on this, and I'm going to do something about it. So right intention, in case of a goal, I say I want to go to Paris. I have to first thing I should probably find out is, how much does it cost to go to Paris? What do I need? What's the airplane ticket fare? What's the hotels? How much money do I need to spend when I'm there? Now I've got this. Now I've got something to work with. I've got this amount of money. Well, I don't have that amount of money. But if I'm focused and I have intention, then I would say, okay, there's only two ways to get this amount of money. Either I have to earn more, or I have to spend less, or a combination of those two. And so I said, well, then I've just got to decide, when do I want to go? Well, I want to go a year from now. I want to go a year from now. So I'm going to take that whole big amount of money, and I'm going to say, I have to save this much money a year from now, by a year from now. Now, some of it has to come first. I mean, I'm going to have to pay for tickets up front. I'm going to have to pay some of my hotel reservation. All that needs to be taken into consideration. But the bottom line is, if me going to Paris, say for a week, is going to cost me $4,000, let's say, that means that between, let's say $5,000. I'm going to live it up. I'm going to have a great time while I'm there. I'm going to spend it would cost me $5,000 to go. And so that means that if I look at that $5,000 and say, well, then what do I need? I need about $470 a month, I have to save. Actually, just if you figure it out by the week, you just say, I've got to save $100 a week in order to be able to do this. I have to save, and so here's my intention. My intention is to go to Paris, and what I do is I say, I'm going to save $100 a week, and then I'll have the money by the time I need it. It'll be there, and all along the way, I'll be able to buy the tickets and all that other kind of thing. So $100 a week, well, that is a certain amount a day. So I figure out what that $100 a week is by the day, and what is it? It's $14 a day, 14 and change, right? So now $14 a day. I have to figure out how to make $14 more, or save $14. So I look at what I spend every day, and you know what's amazing? Most people can find $14 that they spend in the day that they don't need to spend, that they could save. $14. And all of a sudden, what happens in a year? You go to Paris. Now, that's just a very materialistic example, but this is the power of intention. When we really put our attention on something and decide what it is that now, of course, along the year, we can't get weak and decide we need to buy a new TV when we're trying to save up, because we got to figure out what's most important, right? So I'm resolved to go to Paris. Well, how about this? How about if we get back on track of the path that we're on? Say, I'm resolved to be helpful. I have an intention to be helpful. And when I think about that, what does that mean? How does that break down? in a weekly or daily thing. There are a number of things that each and every one of us have the ability to do that we could decide to do more of in the week. I have an intention. Now, my intention is to be helpful. Now, this is very interesting is when we actually think about this at the beginning of the day, as I'm resolved to be helpful, I'm resolved to be of service, then more opportunities come to us to be of service. And more opportunities, of course, come to be happy. Right speech. This is part of the Eightfold Path, is right speech. I'm going to be discerning in what I say. I'm not, well, first, I'm not going to lie. First, and secondly, I'm not going to slander people. I'm going to do everything I can. And as soon as I notice that I'm about to say something bad about someone else, I'm going to stop myself if I'm on the path. And if I find that I did it, then I somehow need to do something to correct it. I need to notice that I did it. Not because I'm going to be punished, but because it's taken me off the path that I thought that I was on and where I want to be. Right speech would also include not just talking to hear myself talk. It would mean not that I don't have to act like I know that I know the answer to something when I don't. It would mean that I don't need to share something with someone that relieves a burden in me, but then puts it on them. And then the next part of the path is right action. This is exactly what we were talking about, doing the right thing for the right reason. Which goes back to, if we think about the right thing for the right reason, goes back to the motivation and the focus. Why am I doing this? So I need to say this thing that I'm going to do next. Is it aligned with my intention? Is it aligned with my intention, and is it helpful? Because the overarching thing is this whole idea of being of service. So then, right livelihood, and this gets very tricky for people. Is this right livelihood, that to actually look at what you do to make money, to live in the world, and see if that thing that you do has a positive effect or does it have a negative effect. And sometimes that can be very complicated because it's not just what you do may not really be having may not cause problems for anyone whatsoever, but then the next step down the line is a problem for somebody. For example, and we got a lot of people here that I'll just say that to work for the war machine, you may have a very innocuous, very harmless kind of a job, but if you work for the war machine, you may find in your meditation, that's how I'm going to say it, you may find in your meditation that you are contributing to suffering by doing even that job that seems very harmless that you're involved in. This is, again, this is not for me to say, but I know I am actually implying it, but people have to come to this on their own. This is very similar, and I know it's not the same example, but when I was sitting in my meditation and the idea of all these copies of CDs came into my mind, I realized that was harmful. That was harmful, so I need to take corrective action. Many people don't think anything of that, and it just doesn't come into their mind, and I'm not telling them they need to change their mind. I just know that I need to change my mind. So, right effort, and then right mindfulness. To be in our right mind means to be paying attention to what we are doing, to pay attention to what our body is doing, to how our body is feeling, to how we are thinking, and to how that thinking turns itself into action or inaction. And this all springs from the meditation practice. Right concentration. The right concentration is what is it that is the single point of my concentration? What am I putting my focus on? Now, in the Eightfold Path that the Buddhists describe, this concentration is a whole other discipline of meditation. It's not just being like open monitoring where you just sit and you're aware of what your thoughts are. Concentration is a single pointed meditation where you put your attention on this one thing and you hold it there. Now, but in a broad sense, what this right concentration means is what exactly is it that you're putting your attention on through the day? What are you concentrating on? And it's amazing, we really don't even know until we start really paying attention to what we're doing. And what will happen, let's see what time is it? Okay, we got just a little bit of time. What will happen if we start to consider these 8 things is what will happen is that we will find out that what we are doing as we are on this path is that first, there's help for us. We do not have to do this. If we look at this, at this eightfold path, it looks like it's a whole lot to do. But there is help for us. And the help is in what is called the refuges, what the Buddhists call the refuges, but are very familiar to most of us. The Buddhists call the refuges, these first refuges, I take refuge in the Buddha, which the Buddha the Buddha is not a person. The Buddha would represent that total higher consciousness. So I'm going to take refuge in that higher consciousness that I know as part of my own nature. So this, in 12-step fellowship, they would say I'm going to take refuge in my higher power, right? So then the Dharma, I'm going to take refuge in the Dharma, and what the Dharma is, the teachings. The Dharma, I'm going to take refuge in the teachings that I've learned. So in 12 steps, we would say I'm going to take refuge in the principles. I'm going to try to put principle first. I'm going to take refuge in the principles. And then the Sangha. The Sangha for the Buddhists is a congregation of practitioners that formally. So I'm going to take refuge in the Sangha, meaning I'm going to take refuge in my community of Buddhists. But that concept has broadened much since then, but we can think about it in the same way. In a 12-step program, we would say, I'm going to take refuge in the fellowship. Take refuge in the fellowship. But broader yet, on this path. If we're going to follow these steps to get ourselves to the place where we are mostly being helpful, mostly giving service, mostly forgiving, then when in times of trouble, we take refuge in God. We take refuge in that higher power, if you will, in the Buddha nature, in the Christ consciousness. We take refuge in that. We take refuge in the principles that we have learned. And we take refuge in the community. When I say community this morning, what I mean is the whole community. The community that we are trying to serve. The community that we are trying to apply our purpose and our function to.